I can only apologise if my voice is sounding a little off in this video. Winter is here, and with it all the lovely sounds of seasonal illness. Still, I'm not going to let that stop me. A little bit of background here for those who might be seeing my channel for the first time. I have a moderately concerning Casio addiction. I just can't get enough of them. I've got G-Shocks, regular models, classics, oddities, and even recently an Oceanus, which is sure to feature on the channel soon enough. My primary weakness for the last few years has always been the octagonal Casio models though, and I think after several purchases I might finally have found my favourite of the lot. So join me if you will for a review of this watch, with an albeit foregone conclusionary discussion about whether or not this deserves a place in my collection or if it needs to find a new home via eBay. With all that said, let's get into the video. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. This is listed as a women's watch on the Casio website. It's also true that the rest of the P2100 range focuses on colours that would be predominantly viewed as traditionally feminine. This is supported by the advertising campaign, which again focuses entirely on advertising the model to a female audience. Now, I personally don't feel that any of this matters, but some people might take umbrage with that view, so let me explain it. First of all, it isn't as if the model is in any way gender labelled on the watch itself, so no one would know. Secondly, as this is the smallest of the octagonal range, it makes the watch itself more inherently wearable for people with smaller wrists or people like me who simply prefer smaller watches. The thing is, anyone who wants big chunky watches has always been catered for by the G-Shock range. This just means that more people can get involved. Then there is the coloration. An all black model doesn't scream any gender in particular, so I see no issues there. Finally, to be blunt, it's nearly 2025. Who really cares? I think part of moving towards gender equality is that actually it becomes so normalised it isn't even a talking point anymore. And with that said, let's move on to actually discussing the watch itself. The first thing you'll notice about this range is that unlike other models across the octagonal G-Shock lineup, there is no indicator half dial at 9 o'clock. These serve different purposes depending on the specific model. They either show the day of the week or indicate the current mode of the watch on more expensive models like the B2100 range. The more traditional sizes of the Casio have been around for a while now, and over time have received a number of upgrades that simply aren't present here. A few examples of this are full or half metal construction, solar power and Bluetooth connectivity. In truth, two of these don't necessarily feel like upgrades to me. If I'm going to treat a watch roughly, potentially as a beta, I don't necessarily want it to be made of metal, especially when the cost of entry is the same as the cost of between 4 and 6 P2100s, depending on what you buy. I've owned a few Bluetooth enabled watches, and I have to say I've never linked one to anything. To me, one of the nicest things about a manual, quartz, digital or automatic movement is they work for themselves. In truth, if it wasn't for making videos, I would quite happily not use my phone at all. The last thing I want is more admin to do with it. Personally, my G-Shock models have always been workout and running watches. A few reasons for that. With their carbon cores, quartz movements, protective casing, sweat-resistant bands, and inexpensive pricing, not only can they withstand a fair bit of punishment, but if you do manage to break one, they're not a huge issue to replace. Having said that, to this day, I am yet to actually damage one so badly it could no longer function. Another reason is I simply love the design language of the G-Shock range. Most of them put me in mind of the kind of technology you'd find in science fiction films from the 60s, 70s and 80s. I'm thinking A Space Odyssey, I'm thinking Alien, I'm thinking Star Wars, and so they'll always have that nostalgic pull for me. The problem I've always run into is that most models have always been too big for me to wear for anything else. The one exception to that so far has been the GMA-2100, which has very similar dimensions, but a metal case that by its nature is more prone to showing signs of damage. In contrast, the reason I'm such a big fan of the P2100 is not only is it durable, but it has sizing that means I can wear it comfortably in more places. It will fit under the cuff of a shirt. It will also withstand a workout. An added bonus is that you can also pick one up for much less than a GMS-2100, and you're not going to be worrying about picking up scratches. On a side note, if you're looking specifically for an all-black rugged model, I have recently had my eye drawn to the collaboration between Casio's ProTrek range and Japanese fashion brand White Mountaineering. The ProTrek PRJ-B001WM1 shares a lot of similar design language with the Casio range, while offering an even more rugged outdoorsman aesthetic. For those of you put off by the women's watch tag and smaller dimensions of the P2100, this is far more in the standard G-Shock wheelhouse at 14mm thick and 46mm in diameter. It also highlighted a bit of an oddity to me. Casio don't currently stock their ProTrek range in the UK. Not too sure why not, but I'll certainly be keeping more of an eye out the next time I see one overseas. Now, I would like to take a moment just to acknowledge that this P2100 model does suffer with one issue that cannot be ignored, and that is legibility. A long-standing criticism of the entire range has been the dial light and digital display being hard to read. My personal experience has been that with the GMS-2100, reading the digital display in direct sunlight is a real pain. My GM-2100N had a handset that colour matched the dial, making the analog display difficult to read in dull lighting conditions, and unfortunately this P2100 suffers from both of these problems to some extent. I do think that the light situation is a little better. I don't know that the source is any different, but the combination of a reverse display and smaller dial does seem to make it easier to read for me. As for the analog display, if you buy any monochrome watch, it's always an issue that you can run into. Now, weak legibility is a bit of a problem when it comes to buying a watch, but as I've detailed here, it's actually a problem across the whole model range and not specific to the P2100. It's definitely not a deal breaker for me, because in most lighting conditions it isn't a problem at all, but you might find yourself having to angle your wrist a bit. This isn't always a quick glance to tell the time with. When it comes to actually buying this watch, I got mine while on a visit to Tokyo, and after paying local prices plus a tax-free discount, it came to just under $100 US. I discussed this purchase with a friend back home in the UK who saw the watch and liked it, and he couldn't find the model online from any UK retailers. I've looked and I couldn't find it either, so I can only assume that this is not a global release at the time of writing. Having said that, it still wasn't hugely expensive to purchase either in the UK already via eBay or to import from overseas. When you title the video "My New Favourite," I don't think it leaves the audience in much doubt as to whether or not the conclusion will be to keep the watch or sell it. But just to cover that base for the sake of the video, yes, I will be keeping this. I love the all black aesthetic, rubber case and strap, affordable pricing, stripped down dial design and smaller sizing. That makes this a less busy, more wearable, more durable and easier to replace piece for me that I can wear more often than I might be able to if it were bigger. While I think I could wholeheartedly recommend an octagonal G-Shock to anyone, it wouldn't necessarily be this one though, because what I perceive to be strength, others could easily argue as weaknesses. I think that's absolutely fine, particularly with a range like this which has so much depth to it, because if you want a bigger watch, a metal one with more functionality, one that links to your phone, one with solar and so on, Casio already have you covered. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in future.